and we will start the session. So today we've got 3 presentations here, and again we'll be doing 10 minutes of the video and then 10-minute Q&A. I'm here, so my name is Emmanuel, and I'm supported by Vivien. And the first paper is from Chalmers. We've got Lost and Found in Translation, Top-Down Decoupling and Bottom-Up Recoupling of Strategies and Practices in Construction Production. And this is by Kifokeris and Martin Löwstedt.
Hello and welcome to this presentation. I am Dimosthenis Kifokeris, and I'm going to present to you Lost and Found in Translation, Top-Down Decoupling and Bottom-Up Recoupling of Strategies and Practices in Construction Production, which I co-authored with Martin Löwstedt. Both Martin and myself are affiliated with the Chalmers University of Technology in Gothenburg, Sweden. Research and practice in the Swedish context and elsewhere have shown that construction production strategies brought about by upper management are a lot of times decoupled from their translation into on-site practices, which can negatively affect the diffusion of production efficiency and value maximization concepts like lean construction. So the aim of this study is to conceptualize a best practice-informed production strategy schema drawing from the site manager's perspective, and in that we focus on the Swedish construction sector context in order to acknowledge national institutional specificities. As our theoretical background, we have on the one side lean construction with its focus on waste elimination and value maximization for the client, and especially the practical lean construction production variants that have to do with production processes and or production strategy, and are, for example, aimed at improving production coordination and task control. And on the other hand, we have the strategy as process and practice framework, which approaches strategy as both a socially influential and contextually influenced activity. Methodologically, we conducted a systematic literature review augmented with units of analysis, which focused on the entire time span lean construction was introduced and then used within Sweden. But also this review had an explicit focus on studies that featured empirical material about the experiences of site managers during production. As such, the 2 main themes in our review were the lean construction production practice variants and the site manager's disposition towards production best practices and top-down imposed improvements. During the iterations of our review, we used the abductive reasoning of qualitative research. The results of our literature analysis can be broadly categorized into the ones having to do with the vertical integration between managerial levels and practices, the loose coupling of processes, and finally the interdependencies of those two with lean construction production variants in practice. When it comes to vertical integration, site managers resist the imposition of lean construction production variants due to established practices and are usually the ones deciding about construction methods used by subcontractors and suppliers. There are poor shared perceptions between organizational levels due to the lack of communication and goal sharing. Site employees take responsibility for their own tasks and solve problems directly, but also limit the experience diffusion. Prefer a bottom-up responsibility delegation to craftsmen, which limits the top-down intervention on production control, and collective professional ideals of practical problem solving sometimes hinder the operationalization of top-down production improvement strategic initiatives, like lean construction production variants. When it comes to loose coupling, site managers are required to plan their schedule activities in detail, but also find ad hoc solutions for unanticipated problems. There are tight couplings between in-project processes, but on the other hand, there are loose couplings between actors in the broader project network. The site manager's work is generally separated from upper managerial strategizing because, among other things, there are different perceptions of productivity between upper managers and site managers. Site managers are constantly coupling production processes tighter to each other and also themselves as site managers. This is due to a collective tendency for independence informed by professional identity and expertise, which also emotionally charges their work. And they also strive to remain loosely coupled to the parent organization by resisting top-down initiatives for coupling operation strategizing with production, like for example the lean construction production variants. The effect of the aforementioned two practical lean construction production variants shows that vertical integration and bottom-up platform accommodation are generally not realized. Loose coupling is sustained by site managers, which means that top-down and bottom-up strategizing and integration are not only about process alignment, but also current work practices, which, if not satisfied, the loose coupling will remain. Transforming production processes through strategizing will also require transforming the professional work itself, and implementing the lean construction production variants should consider relevant work roles and how they are embedded in construction production. Given the results of our literature review, we propose a bottom-up best practice-informed production strategizing schema in order to offer a concept of understanding the disintegration and decoupling within the Swedish context, as well as reinforce production by taking on board both top-down standardization through lean construction and the flexible bottom-up buffer zones allowing for innovations and out-of-box solutions. In this schema, the two practical lean construction production variants are not only blended on the implementational level, but the processes variant is embedded as a constituent in the strategy variant. This points to the fact that, according to SAP, processes should be practically considered as an integral part of strategizing. The implementation of these nested lean construction production variants is informed by a cyclic iterative process in which upper management brings in the diffusion of the variants mainly through the sub-themes of temporality in structures and systems, while site management facilitates and informs through performed work and best practices, such an implementation mainly through the sub-themes of cognition and emotionality, language and meaning, materiality and tools, and actors and agency. In more detail, for upper management, temporality can be reflected in the longer processes of strategizing within the Swedish construction context. Structures and systems can be connected to the structural and systemic changes impacting the construction companies and can form ongoing processes currently passing through, among others, investments for digital innovation, the expansion of IT infrastructure, and institutional shifts brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. For site management, actors and agency tap into the site manager's role, tendencies, and work identities, as well as the resolving of the tensions in the power play with upper management. Materiality and tools regard the hands-on practical problem solving on site with what the site managers themselves have established as best practices and handling. Language and meaning, with their attention to the formation of strategic ideas as a longer-term process, revolve around clarifying business, strategy, management, collaboration, and communication via the collection and dissemination of site managers' field data, experiences, and work practices. And finally, cognition and emotionality consider the emotional capital imbued in the site manager's work, as well as their self-image on their identity and expertise. The darker coloring, bigger arrow size, and larger number of associated sub-themes, 4 out of 6, pertaining to the site manager's part of the schema, reflects our understanding that on the implementational level, the bottom-up facilitation of the practical lean construction production variants holds more weight than the top-down diffusion. However, bottom-up facilitation cannot operate in a vacuum and without top-down diffusion, but rather one constantly feeds into another. Therefore, the cycle reflects an approach for collaboration in construction management and features a constant feedback loop. Decision-making is consensus-based, democratic, and characterized by a flat organizational structure. As discussion points, we can say that practical lean construction production variants emphasize vertical integration and standardized production processes spanning organizational project boundaries. Projects are conditioned by norms, values, strategic plans, and routines, but site managers sustain loose couplings between the organization and projects. There is a failure to collect, compile, and translate information into usable knowledge or guidelines for a more efficient production strategy and processes. And there is much pressure on site managers to deliver. They accept this as long as they manage production their own way. In order to standardize production processes, top managers should redistribute responsibility for production performance up their own organizational levels and not only diffuse the consequences on professional work, which in a way puts them out of the loop. And we think that we should avoid the horseshoe theory. In practice, upper and side management are not gravitating to or away from each other with equal force. On the implementation level, we believe that the truth of production rarely lies in the middle. As concluding remark to our study, we can say that the site manager's work practices are decoupled from production-related initiatives imposed by top managers, like, for example, lean construction production variants. To tackle this on the implementation level, lean construction production processes should form a subset of lean construction production strategy. Collaborative, consensus-based decision-making in construction management should combine top-down diffusion and bottom-up facilitation of production improvement concepts and practices. And the contextualization of this whole framework is both a blessing and a curse. A contextualized best practice informed production strategizing concept may accurately reflect specific needs and goals, but on the other hand, it might be difficult to replicate. That is all, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Dimos, I'm going to bring you and Martin up so that people can have their questions for you. So, and while that is going on, if anybody has got questions for, if anybody has questions that they would want to, okay, cool. Oh, perfect. Vivien, does that mean everybody can talk now?
Everybody can talk now. If you cannot, if your mic is for some reason not working, feel free to put your question in the chat.
Okay.
So initial questions people have. They can.
I have an initial question about the nature of loose your findings on aspects of the project that are loosely coupled versus sort of tightly coupled. Tightly coupled? Anyway, my question is whether or not you found any tension points between, how people wanted to behave in a network, how they wanted to, you were talking about how they were resisting certain processes, they wanted it to be loosely coupled, the network between actors, but you also said that the project processes were tightly coupled. So did you find any points of tension between how they want it to be and how the project needed to be to run?
This study was mainly based. I mean, I'm taking the model here, but also Martin, I'm pretty sure he has a lot to say about this. This study was based on secondary data initially taken from literature review, and in this literature review did have empirical data. I mean, this was one of the filters we used for our review. In this data, this empirical data, it was really found that there was a tension. There was a tension that was not always resolved adequately in that sense, but in most cases, as far as I understood, it was mostly the results that spoke for themselves. So if in the end the project was delivered with a good quality or on time or in budget and stuff like that, then this tension kind of diffused without actually being resolved. And I guess that a lot of this tension might have to do with, the more you move up to the managerial ladder, the more you kind of get removed from the everyday problems and situations on the construction side, which the site managers have to find ad hoc and on-the-spot solutions all the time. This does emotionally charge their work. It's like, I'm solving things here. What are you telling me what to do? But the thing is that when you have strategic initiatives like lean construction variants that are imposed from above, these are also imposed or communicated with a certain mindset. So it's not that one is at odds with the other, but in practice, a lot of times this is actually the case. That's why we kind of propose this schema, trying to conceptualize how this could be resolved somehow.
Thank you.
This tension.
Really interesting. Yeah.
So before another question comes, if I could throw one quick one in there. So as much as people want to allow for innovation and language and meaning to play a role in a project, how much affected are they by the pressures of time and financial constraints to deliver the job and stop trying to fix your internal politics?
Martin, would you like to take up this one? I do have things to say, but
yeah. I mean, I can say I actually performed those loose coupling studies that we sort of use as secondary data in this paper. I would say that, I mean, you have the traditional tension, of course, that the site managers are responsible for the end result and evaluated on the end result, and their actual sort of practices performing, getting them there are sort of sanctioned by the company. They can use whatever they like, but they are in full responsibility. And I think that their message to top management is, as long as you keep distributing the responsibility to us, we won't accept your initiatives if we don't like them. So in order for sort of lean production variants to be better implemented, I mean, their message is that the responsibility need to be redistributed along the organizational echelon, so to speak. And that goes for sort of the performance indicators that you refer to there in your question. So they are in one sense against standardization per se, because their job identity is to be these great problem solvers. But on the other hand, they say that, okay, we can be in favor of your initiatives, but you need to also share the responsibility during the implementation phases, basically.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So we've got a comment from May. May said, good presentation, she enjoyed it. And Barry's also said a similar one, but he's got a quick question. I think he's also worked with the model before, but he was asking, are there any thoughts on how the model could be made more accessible for industry practitioners?
I mean, if we want this to be more comprehensible with not so much of an academic load, so to speak, on the language or whatever on it, I think that for me, an education session of a couple of hours, when I say a couple of hours, I don't mean necessarily 2 hours, but some hours could work. I believe that if we strip this more fancy concepts of the sub framework, cognition and emotionality, if we say this with more down to earth words and more practical terms, when I say down to earth, I mean practical, I think it would work. It is mostly a social exercise in my understanding, and it's probably to begin with, it could work in projects where there's not so much pressure. For example, I am now in another project where, among other things, we follow the site processes on park recreation, on the Parks and Recreations department here in Gothenburg, and the construction sites that we work in, they're not low stakes, of course. No construction site is low stakes, but indeed is not a skyscraper or something like that. So in that setting, I think we could start propelling this kind of framework into as a social exercise, into a team, or maybe construct a game to make it more accessible, and then we can move on, probably, if this becomes like a kind of a cultural aspect in the company.
I could say very briefly, my take on it would be to formulate the mantra that remember that in order to transform process, you need also to transform professional work.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. With that said, we will be moving on to the next presentation. Thank you so much, guys. This was quite
Thank you, everyone.
exciting. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so now we've got development of causal loop diagram for bridge resilience, and this is being presented by Vishal.
Hello everyone. It is pleasure to be participating in this conference and annual meeting. My name is Vishal Lad, and I am going to present on topic development of causal loop diagram for bridge resiliences. I am presenting it from Surat, India. So this is a part of my ongoing research, ongoing PhD work, and I and my professors are exploring the concept of bridge resilience, and our aim is to develop the policies for the resilience of the bridge. So the background and the motivations which we came from was the non-functionality and the failure of the bridge, which significantly impact the commercials and the services economic, and most importantly the losses of human lives. However, this failure is very rare, and regarding this, a few of the studies have recorded the bridge failures in USA, Colombia, and China, and these were due to the various different disasters. And regarding this, already a lot of research has been conducted regarding maintenance of the bridges, safety of the bridges, risk assessment of the bridges. But still, a little concept has been explored regarding the resilience of the bridges. So before we come to the bridge resilience, let us know what resilience is. So the resilience means the bounce back of a particular system or a object. So if we take an example of a bridge over here, so we can say that the system performance over here of a bridge can be said through its physical conditions, or you can say structural conditions, or through a traffic flow. And if any disaster happens, like say flood, then how much degradations it will happen, and how quickly a particular bridge can recover from that degradation is known as the resiliences. The previous literature says that there are 11 aspects of resiliences, out of which four are the properties of resilience, 4 are the dimensions of resilience, and 3 are the results of the resilience. Now, to further explore this 11 aspects, so if we want those 3 results, then we need to have a better robustness, better rapidity, with more resourceful and redundancy. And to fulfill this 4 properties of resilience, we also require the 4 dimensions, that is technical, organization, social, and economic, and these are engaged under the infrastructure owners, or you can say bridge owners. So based on these concepts, lot of research has been conducted, or you can say research has been conducted in last decade for the bridge resiliences. But most of these researchers have focused on the evaluations of resilience through by developing a resilience matrix, or by evaluating it using a single measure index. And another point is that they have not considered the interdependencies of another infrastructures like transportation networks, other utility infrastructures, and governance systems. So this seeks the opportunity for us, and we are in this study, the objective of our study is to identify those factors that influence the resiliency of the bridge, and more importantly, those interdependencies also have the dynamic behaviors. So we can say that those factors can changes every years, or changes those factors can change every year, and to disaster to other different disasters. So the objective of this research was to identify those factors for the bridge resiliency, considering the transportation network, utility infrastructure, and governance systems. And based on those factors, we will develop a causal loop diagram, which is called as a CLD. So for this, the research methodology was phased into the 2 phases. So starting with the first phase, in the first phase we have used the Delphi method, which was developed by the RAND Corporation, and mostly it is a systematic and interactive research technique where we can object judgment from the panelists, where this panelist have the experts which we can select through a predefined guidelines, and they need to be in the 2 or 3 more than 2 rounds. And this technique basically is to identify and to shortlist the factors. So as I have told, it requires a predefined guideline. So literature suggests that these guidelines can be modified as per the area, as per the conditions, and as per the research. So this is the guideline which we have modified for the study, and based on this guideline we have selected this 10 experts, which average experience of the 10 experts is 17 years. So starting with the first round, these 10 experts were approached with the Google form and through Google Meet tools because of this current pandemic situations. So in the first round, a structured questionnaire with a 2-point Likert scale was used, and 20 factors which were identified from the literatures were taken to them, and discuss whether they are satisfied with those factors or not. And after of that, they all were satisfied with those 20 factors, except one factors was given by them. The reason for giving this one factor we will discuss afterwards. Then in the second round, 6-point Likert scale was used, where based on this 6-point Likert scale, we did computed the statistical parameters like absolute deviation, median, coefficient of variance, and range, and based on those we have eliminated 7 factors. The limit was set was 1.25 and 3 for median, CV, and range respectively. Then in the third round, the conciseness about the or you can say the agreement about those 14 factors and eliminating this 7 factors was done. Then in the second phase, the causal loop diagram was developed. So the basic definition of the causal loop is a closed sequence of a cause and effect that can have a closed path of transmission and a return to scale. So considering the guidelines from the literatures and the basic concept of causal loop diagram, the diagram for bridge resiliency was developed, where 4 properties of resilience were considered along with the 3 infrastructures, that is, if you can say, transportation network, other utility infrastructures, and governance systems were considered to develop this. So basically 8 loops were formed from this, and all were the positive loops. So this was the first loop, where you can say interconnections between the transportation network and bridge resiliency was considered for the robustness. This is the second, bridge resiliency and other utility infrastructure considering rapidity and restoration. This is the third one, bridge resiliency and governance considering the rapidity and political conditions. This is the fourth one, bridge resiliency governance systems. The factor which was considered was accessible fuel and energy and resourcefulness. This is the next one, where bridge resiliency and governance systems considering the arrangement of fund and resourcefulness. This is the next loop. This is the 7th loop, and this is the 8th loop. So basically these 8 loops were considered to understand the behavior of all these interdependencies between bridge, transportation network, governance systems and other utility infrastructures. So if we take just a small example of, say, one of the loop, right now at present which we are seeing, wherein the 3 infrastructure systems are involved, that is transportation network, bridge, and governance systems, where political conditions and disasters and average daily traffic are the factors, and robustness is a property of the resilience. So in this, if we consider that if a flood occurs and the transportation network or a bridge has been stopped due to those stopped because of that flood, the traffic flow is stopped because of that flood, then it will affect its robustness. So what the governance system will play the role to have those traffic flow normal with that bridge. So in that, political conditions and that pre-disaster preparedness is one of the factors which is important. So this all 8 loops were discussed with the 10 experts, and this causal loop was validated with the same 10 experts, and based on this, the conclusion which we conducted, that this causal loop can help us to manage the assets of the bridges, and this methodology can be a general. However, the work is still in progress, as this methodology can be used for forecasting the future of the bridge resilience, and based on this we can prepare the resilience of the governance policy for the bridge resiliency, considering the different dynamic tools. Thank you. That's all from my sides.
Thank you, Vishal. And we're moving into the discussion mode, so everybody can ask a question. And before they jump in, I'll ask one quick question. So in terms of the 21 factors that you looked at for the resilience of the bridge, you did not consider the construction process, the construction phase of it. So whether labor competence or materials or anything like that. I know you took into consideration a lot of the factors after the bridge had been built, but if there were any inherent vulnerabilities built in there earlier, wouldn't that play a role in how it would affect their overall performance?
Yes, definitely it would have played a role, but I have scoped my factors towards till the existing bridges, not for the new constructions of the bridges. So at present, whatever the existing bridges are there, and how we can make them resilient in terms of traffic and in terms of structural health. So
So in terms of the timeline, you looked at those that had already been in existence and were
yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
So I have a question. If there's room for me to ask a question. I mean, first of all, I really like causal loop diagrams, and especially for communication. So this links to one of the questions from the last presentation about communicating to practitioners. I think causal loop diagrams can be a very useful tool to explain to someone who is not a researcher about how things interconnected. My question is this. You have identified in the presentation, I think 8, he said, reinforcing loops, right? So areas or interdependencies where it would be sort of mutually beneficial to all factors if one were to be improved. It would lead to the whole system improving. So that's really useful to know. But what I want to ask is whether or not you have found, from looking at a systems view, instances where there might the attempt to optimize parts of the system will result in sub-optimization of another part of the system.
Yes, I'm working on it. As at the last, in the conclusion, I have told that I'm still working on it. So I will use the dynamic approaches or optimization approaches, or you can say optimization techniques, to elaborate this thing, that if one system is affected, then how means if we improve one system, and what will be the effect on the other systems. So I'm still working on it, and hopefully I will be there in 1 or 2 months for that.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Any more in the chat if you want to also? Okay, all right. Vishal, I'll go while we wait for more questions. In the beginning, you picked a few countries. I think you picked China, US, and a few other countries.
Colombia and USA. Yes.
Okay. Yes. Now, what were the comparative factors that you used to, pick these countries, or did you just pick any countries that were in?
No, this was from the literature. Like, I was going through the resilience literature, and I found this thing where they have mentioned that the breach failures due to natural hazards, and if you can see those graphs, so most of them are because of the floods. So as of now, where I am doing the research, the Surat. So Surat is also a city which face intense floods. If I tell that, means more every 4 years there would be a flood over here, and it would be a high intensity flood where almost a level raise means up till 15 feet high water would be there. So water level would rises. So because of this study motivated me to consider the flood as a hazard and to work for the bridge resiliency against the flood. Because the Surat city is connected with the 12 bridges, and right now one more construction is going on for the bridge. So two separate similar parts of city is there, and they are connected with the 12 bridges. So it is important, and all those important infrastructures for, like, say, railway connectivity or airport connectivity or road connectivity, they are mostly connected with the one part of the city, and another part is left behind. So to have a better transportation flow between them during those flood time, because in 2006 a major flood that occurs, means that broke the records of every 100 years. So during that time, that part of the city totally lost the connectivity regarding this traffic flow and transportation flow, and it was a challenging to provide the people the basic utility things to those people. So this literature helped me that we can also study on the flood and considering the flood as a hazard for the resilience, and consider the bridge as one of the important infrastructures in the transportation network.
Okay. And sorry, I'm hugging up all the questions, but that's only because I've not seen people jump up. You mentioned one thing that I find very interesting in any research of areas that brings about a bit of politics. So in some of the factors you looked at politics and available funds. And you just explained that at some point there was one side of the city or something cut off by the bridge, yeah?
Yes,
now,
yes.
How significant is the central government to this point, or these are all local government issues?
No, actually both governments need to play a role, and for that only the loop is connected to the disaster preparedness. So how the local government arrange or have the availability of the funds, at particularly what fund is available and how quickly they can arrange to provide the basic utility to those peoples. So this is the thing where actually political conditions more comes into picture.
Okay.
So if there is a dispute between local government and central government, then we can have the issues for providing the basic immunities.
That's understandable. Thank you very much. Any final questions?
Maybe I have a quick one.
Okay.
So is it fair to say that you are looking at facility management perspectives? Looking at sort of, bridge resilience from a facilities management perspective?
No. I am actually working on the policies, like what are the different policies if we consider these 16 factors, if we consider the future resilience. So what would be the policy play the roles, and how every yearly or by considering the situations, how we can change those policy and how we can utilize those policy for betterment of.
So let me add to what Vishal just said. I think from Vivien's perspective, yes, it is from that, and Vishal's looking at the external factors that affect facilities management and asset management. So yes, it ties in.
Yes, somewhat it ties.
Yes, it ties in. Yes, okay.
Yes,
perfect. Thank you so much, Vishal, and we'll move back to the final presentation, and we'll do the same in a second. Okay, perfect. So for our final presentation, we have Vasil, and he's just pointed out that he was struggling a bit with his audio. So if there are any initial questions, if we could start typing them on the side, it would be really helpful. So this work is on forensic delay analysis, and it's an investigation of the reasons for disagreements in time-related disputes. One of the nightmares of any construction project.
Hi. And thank you for your interest in our paper. The arguments and results presented here are part of a wider study with my PhD. As indicated in the title, the aim of this paper is to identify the reasons for disagreement in time-related disputes or delay disputes. This is necessary because, according to many recent reports, construction delay disputes are expensive, time-consuming, widespread, and persistent, and without knowing the reason for disagreement, effective solutions cannot be recommended. Here is the structure of this presentation, which follows broadly the structure of the paper presented in this conference. Delay disputes are common and endemic in construction. This is not surprising, since it is a highly fragmented industry which requires the coordination of different entities, meaning that projects include a number of contractual relationships. However, when time is overrun, who bears the losses? The general principle within contract for delay damages and extension of time, usually called a compensation event, an expression used in the NEC forms of contract, but contractual provisions in general often cannot cope with complexities and uncertainties of individual cases. This caused attempts to create more explicit protocols like the SCL protocol in the UK and the American Association of Cost Engineering Practice Recommendation in the US that attempt to tackle the complexities. However, these protocols aren't contractuals. So what normally happens is claim arises between a client, a contractor, subcontractor, and so on. In an ideal world, these claims should be resolved by the administration of the contract, and there should be unequivocal evidence that backs up the position of the claimant. However, this is rarely the case, and the claim usually becomes disputes. This situation is so common that it has created some £200 billion industry that is controlled primarily by a relatively small number of firms specializing in delay analysis globally. Reflecting its investigative nature, the specialism is referred to as forensic delay analysis. In the language of transaction cost economics, construction claims are unlikely to be resolved in situations of bounded rationality and information asymmetry because of, among others, opportunistic behavior. It has been previously argued that the current situation can be improved by making that information accessible and transparent. As previously indicated, the literature is generally highly critical of the number of contractual disputes within the construction sector, specifically delay disputes. Researchers have been writing about the type of digital information required to improve the current situation. The literature also indicates that the current guidance is based around a set of recommended delay analysis methods, although there is no formal standard practice for delay analysis. The selection of these methods depends on the context. However, recent research indicates that some methods are more accurate than others, and nothing prevents the parties to set up the contract in a way that the most reliable delay analysis method is used, particularly in standard forms of contract where project management is at the heart of the contract, like NEC and FIDIC. Some studies identify factors that impact delay disputes. However, the data sources relied upon are interviews and questionnaires and other secondary sources that are not the sources used in disputes. So the question here is, are those sources complete and accurate? This study used 12 delay assessment reports, including expert and non-expert reports, and 12 responses to those reports, and some replies to the responses and decisions if the last two were available. The sample includes 12 projects based in the UK and overseas that were managed by various organizations For ethical reasons, the cases have been anonymized and described by their function. Starting point was around 40 case studies. The selection of the cases was based on 3 criteria: 1, dispute; 2, recency, meaning that the case studies was selected from a period between January 2016 and January 2021, and perhaps the most significant filter was availability of delay expert report and a response to that report. This is important because it enabled the researcher to use typical language from the sector for the purposes of this paper and to maintain a degree of impartiality. The findings include 5 categories of disagreement that can be seen on the left-hand side of the table illustrated on this slide. Reasons for disagreement relating to the baseline program is one of those categories. As-built programs and records is arguably another 1 or 2 categories. The analysis or interpretation of delays and some other fact-based disagreement, as well as cause and effect arguments. The initial analysis revealed the most striking findings include, in relation to the first category, alterations of the contractual baseline was never accepted as a justification by the relevant decision maker when the baseline program was a contractual document. Assumptions as to the baseline logic were only accepted if the baseline did not provide logic. As-built records, although sometimes incomplete, were always available to at least one of the parties. The use of unrecognized delay analysis method and or a modified critical path assessment method were the most common reasons for disagreement, and moreover, if contemporaneous records were withheld, the delay analysis was theoretical because it relied on assumptions rather than facts and was rejected by the decision maker. The initial analysis revealed that the forensic delay analysis process can be divided into the categories illustrated in the top table. So, what is the meaning of these findings? There is a clear link with behavioral economics where the language of transaction cost economics can be used to explain the findings. For example, in terms of lack of information, or as described in TCE, information asymmetry, if the as-built programs are unavailable electronically to one party, this limits the party's rationality when making decisions relating to a dispute. This is likely to perpetuate the disagreement if one party does not have the required information to reach a settlement. Consequently, the disagreement cannot be resolved during the contract administration phase of the project and escalates to a dispute. Here is a summary of the main points made in this paper. I'd like to draw to your attention point number 5 and 6, specifically that the interplay of the factors identified in this paper is used to perpetuate delay disputes, and behavior is the root cause, and some of the evidence for this is A, that parties and their experts always disagree on the methodology, and also that some of the parties often withhold information that is important to the other side to make a decision or agree on a settlement. In terms of next steps, the research that is ongoing is identification of the relative importance of the factors identified in this paper. In other words, further testing of the factors, creation and testing of a requirements model, testing the likelihood of the adoption of the requirements model by the construction and legal sector via scenario analysis. I'd like to invite those of you with experience in this area to participate in this research by completing the questionnaire that's available here. Here is a summary of some of the key references used in this paper. Thank you very much for listening, and I welcome now any questions on this paper.
Thank you so much, Vasil. I know you said you've managed to get the audio working, so I'm putting it in discussion mode, and then we can have as many people throw in their questions as possible. So I don't have any. I looked at the chat, and I don't have any questions yet. Any question from the audience for now? I think if you want to, you can turn on your microphone and ask your question. So in the meantime, I would be happy to ask, everybody is up in the chat, so I'd like to ask you the first question. In terms of disputes and, trying to resolve all of the issues we have, I know one of the factors we looked at were information. And as we stand, I think we have, everybody tries to use BIM as the solution, well, the fundamental concepts of BIM as the solution for every problem. Do you think if we had the information that is supposed to be shared at an initial stage of a project, these problems would magically disappear? And I use these words carefully. Vasil? I think we have lost the audio for Vasil. I'll keep an eye on the chat to see if he's put. Okay, go ahead, Leon. Oh, okay, Vasil. I also unmuted your microphone, so if you can talk, if you could answer my question, and Leon also has a question for you. Leon, you can unmute your microphone and go for now.
Okay. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, thanks. So, pretty much interested in this, if it were not only because I'm at the moment also struggling with my own mini construction project at home, facing not yet any delay, well, maybe a delay in due time, but just wondering, Vasil, so now if you've kind of done some sort of a review, a little bit more than that, right? Trying to also make a sort of taxonomy or categorization of these delay factors and how that would, kind of cluster together. I'm quite curious then, what would be in terms of how that, since you also say this is part of your PhD, how that would kind of fit into the main goal of your PhD. Yeah? So having made some first overview and taxonomy is, I think, very valuable. But there was what I'm perhaps even more curious about is how that would be a step for like the next a basis for the next step in your project, if you know what I mean.
Okay. So Vasil said his PC is not recognizing his microphone. I'm working on the requirements model. The reasons for disagreement would inform the model. So he's still in the developmental phase of it. Vasil, I know you put your survey link at the back of the presentation. If you wanted to share it, you could still put it in the chat here, and if people wanted to pick up on that, they could look at it too.
So that would become more like a descriptive model, I guess, then, right? So the funny part, of course, is about delay disputes, that you the model only makes sense if you have a delay, and then there's often already a dispute. So I was wondering, would it help also anticipate delays or reduce the impact of a dispute, or that would be great to know. I don't know whether it would be something you can type in, but yeah. So in terms of practical value, what would then that help?
As we're going, since Vasil can get on the chat on the audio, if anybody also has a comment, question, any other discussion on the previous papers as well, we could bring them in. Okay, so he said the aim is simply to reduce the amount of disputes. Okay. I know a few technical issues had popped up in other sessions, but when you're faced with it, then you have to try to make up the discussions. And dispute resolution are, some of the most exciting ones in a way, because everybody faces them in the different projects people work on. So by improving the acceptability of the delay analysis method by the parties, this is so there's a chat going on if you've not seen that. Leon and Vasil, obviously sharing a similar research area, are having a conversation, and I'm trying to read it out. So people, Leon goes, so people need to consult it in advance, and Vasil says yes, by improving the acceptability of the delay analysis method by the parties. And then, or this is more a learning tool for construction management professionals, and as it appears to be a central issue. That's the final one from Vasil. I think they speak in a forensic analysis area, so they're both enjoying it. Any final questions, comments? We've got about 4 minutes left. If it's for Dimos' paper, or if it's for Vishal's paper, or this one as well, we're happy to take any further ones before we bring this to a close. Okay, and the final comment from Vasil is the use of technology to capture and share the as-built data. That links back to the question I asked earlier about how BIM is fixing every problem in the world, or supposed to be helping. So that still would be sharing good information around for all people involved in the project. Okay, Leon has complemented all the presentations we had earlier with the decoupling and the bridge practice. So thank you, everyone. And I will see you all in another session. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And again, if you are looking for anybody that's been in here today, you could meet them in either the cafe, or if you look at the abstract, it should have people's contact details, whether you want to meet up with them later or try to exchange research ideas and follow through, because this is the whole fundamental of the conference, so we can share ideas and then develop our research further. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming here, and I will see you all in another room. Thank you.